Okay, here's another good little one to look at. This place, usual rising damp. It's been rendered externally with a very strong mix of cement-based render. It's also had the side of it rendered, which you can see here. Now, it's been a considerable amount of time that this has been in place, and it's actually, as you can see from all this spalled brickwork here on the pillar, it's actually driven the moisture up to this height. So we've removed the render, and we're now, I've cut a channel today where we're going to set in a land drain. Going to use NHL to bed the land drain in the channel that we're cutting, and then the rendering will be carried out with a hot lime render mix that we're going to put onto the brickwork. As you can see, the brickwork is so badly spalled now, trying to remove that render. So it's another good little one to look at for those of you who think you're just going to knock a bit of render off and point the brickwork up and it's all going to look brand new. It's 50-50, to be honest, what you're going to find when you knock it off. To make matters even worse, and how the damp specialists weren't able to clock this one, is that air brick there was actually, I mean, obviously the slab's been cut back now, so you can't physically see directly, but that slab was directly under that air brick. So what all they've done is they've turned the air brick into a water funnel. Now, the other good thing that comes out of this is that down here, if you look along the top line of that air brick, you just make out the original slate DPC in this building that was rendered over with cement render, so that was breached. And also, in addition to that, they then thought it'd be, we'll just finish it off with a nice rendered plinth on top, until now, where we're going to actually save it and bring it back to what is always a beautiful old Edwardian home. It's just some little pieces of the plinths that I mentioned, which we haven't actually got off yet, but when we get round to excavating that area, we will take that lot off as well. Now, during digging it all out, what we started hitting was courses of brickwork. So we carried on digging and carefully digging, because I knew what we're to expect to find down there. And yeah, we've actually unearthed the original foundations of the building, and it's a really nice one to see, because we don't often see photos, imagery and all that online of these brickwork stepped foundations that were quite normal in Victorian, Edwardian, even through to the 20s, but here we've found a real one, and it's nice to see it in situ. It's all in still good condition. There's no movement in any of that, despite the fact the amount of moisture that's travelled through the ground here. We're on a very steep hill here, very steep indeed, and yet it just goes to show again that the beauty of the lime mortar originally used in this brickwork hasn't failed. Despite all of the damage that's been added on by the damp specialists, look at these beautiful foundations. They're still sitting there. They haven't moved. There's no sign of any movement whatsoever in those. And to say this place, believed to be turn of the last century. So we're looking at a 120-year-old building here. Yeah, it's fabulous the way it survives. If we don't meddle with the bloody places, just leave the things to do what they were built to do. Right, well, here we go. Next little stage in the operations. We've continued, but we've made more of a mess here. Because as we started to look into doing the connections onto this gully that's down here, which the gully, as you can see, hasn't been set so it's squarely lining up to our new drain that we're going to put in. So we were looking at how do we get around that. We'll make a bit of wiggle room for it. So by exposing the areas around, we've actually found that the drain itself, the old British drain, is broken. It's got a great big hole in it. And here's a piece of it here. You can see by the dirt on that fracture, this is not a new fracture. It's obviously an old issue. Drains break, ground swells, ground shrinks. They don't. That's part of life. So we've now got to remove the entire thing here, and we've just been shopping and bought this plastic one, and then we've got to do a bit of jiggery pokery because the outlet on this one is effectively too low, which is meaning that our finished drain height will be too high for lining up with the slab and taking the surface water. So yeah, a bit more playing around, but it's another good thing to note, because when you're working on houses like this, never assume that it's all going to be easy. It never is. Right, so the next thrilling instalment, we've just been cutting out to fit in some air bricks in here. Now we've got the telescopic ones that we're popping in there. There wasn't one here before, and now we know the reason why is because the drain, which is put that bag over it to stop all the crap from falling down the new section we put in. But previously, obviously, you couldn't put a straight air brick in there because the drain where the air brick needs to exit on the inside would have been on top of the drain. So we've put one in there, and where the other one was, I've left the original. You just see in the back there. And where the other one was, just see in the back there is the old clay vent that was in there with an air brick at the face, and it was too low. Again, we gone back. This is our DPC line. You can see the slate, and it was too low to the original slab and letting water in. So I've just cut a little brick slip. I've left the horns on it. This is from just a reclaimed brick that we've had from the job. So in effect, I'm going to put the air vent in on the next course up. So I left those horns to support the air brick that's going in. I'll put in a new section of DPC over the top of what we're looking at now, this brick slip, and then the air vent above that. So that gets us 2 courses up off of the slab. But in doing all of this malarkey with the making up that little brick slip, I've done it all with a grinder and a diamond disc. But the good thing that comes out of this, which is not always seen, is the if you look at this, you can see a clear dark line along the bottom here, just slightly above where I've cut for this air brick on this side, and then pretty much in line with where the new air brick is going on this side, or the face of the bay. But all of the dust that's been created through me cutting that out, which is, I've had a little quick sweep up locally around where I'm working, but you can see, I mean, it's thick, that red dust everywhere. So that dust has settled on that entire front of the wall. Now what that's now telling me is that where it's lighter at the top, that means that the brickwork is drying out, which is, after taking off the cement render, is what we aim to do, and it's working. Where it's darker at the lower ends, of course the brick dust is hitting that. It's then being moistened and staying and remaining a darker colour. So it's another good indicator that yes, the wall is still damp, but it was only last week we knocked the render off. As you can see, it's higher on this corner where there was no air vent at all under the floor, but also with the drain and the leak that we discovered, so it had constant food source, if you like, that was just feeding that wall. But of course the damp people came in and just put a cement render over it, so that in turn drove the damp even higher, or the moisture even higher, going up into this pillar, and that's what led to these bricks spalling here. So it went quite, I'm sort of looking at roughly around about 5.5 foot, 5'6" at the moment. So it's come up a fair distance. But when I look at this now, this brickwork here, this is now lovely and dry, and it's crumbling and dusty. So it's drying out nicely, and that all within a week. So any damp specialists out there, maybe take note of this one.